And now, ladies and gentlemen, we move on to a session that I'm sure if you've looked at the agenda for day 2, you were definitely waiting for this one to begin. It's time now for us to welcome onto stage our next speaker, who's going to talk about new trends in digital-enabled shopping environments. He's right here with us. He's even going to talk about his special book. We're going to look forward to all of that. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for the Vice President Design, Global Design Strategies, Marriott International. A huge round of applause for Mr. David Kapron.
Thank you. I'm carrying all kinds of stuff. Because I'm the first session after lunch, I'm going to be watching for people who are doing this. Okay? So, and having said that, I flew in from New York yesterday, so actually there are two firsts here. This is my first time in Mumbai, and it's the first time that I've ever done a presentation at 4 o'clock in the morning. So this is going to be good. So we're gonna, you would say, so why is a person who is now working for Marriott International, designing stores around the world for 6 of the brands you see on the screen there, coming to a retail conference? So don't be concerned. I did 22 years in the retail design world prior to joining Marriott 2 years ago. So actually today is my 2-year anniversary working in an adjacent business to the retail space. So yeah, no, come on. I'm just kidding. So we're going to try to do something, and I've got 40 minutes, I think, to run through a number of ideas. And I wanted to say this first. If you have come to see all of the new little tricks and gadgets and killer apps and things like geofencing and beacons and things that are part of the digitally enabled world and how you can use them, this is not the presentation for you. So if you want to leave now, I'm not going to be insulted. But what I do want to do is talk about big themes, all right? And I'm going to talk about 3 big themes, and the big themes are going to be first about customer experience. What is it? Where do we find it? How do we make it? The interesting thing about being in the hospitality world now is that in the hospitality space, we've always talked about experiences. That's what we sell. We sell good night's sleep and a great bed and a good pillow, but ultimately there's no stuff to take home. In the retail world, I spent 20 years trying to figure out how to sell stuff as much as I could, and we're going to learn about the difference between stuff and experiences in the presentation. I'm then going to talk about brain science, and I was really taking notes this morning because Manish, I think his name was, from Unilever started talking about brain science, and I think it's really important that we all understand. I'm a closet neuroscientist. I speak about 20 times a year at conferences around the world, and half of them pretty much are in the world of digital and neuroscience and how these things are changing how we're experiencing stores and branded places. The third part's going to be about the emerging guests. Now, I'm not going to talk about millennials. I think millennials are a great market to focus on. They're really important. They got deep pockets and they're a big segment, but I'm not so interested in them. I'm really interested in my 15-year-old, who I talk about a lot. Actually, no, he's 16. He turned 16 2 weeks ago, and I'm talking about Ben when we get to that section. All right. In each of those sections, there's going to be 5 key ideas. Now, I know a little bit about neuroscience, and what I know about that is that's way too much for you to remember. You're going to remember like 5 ideas in one section, or maybe 5 ideas across all 3, but you'll never remember 15. So this book, Retail Revolution, was published let's say 3 years ago now, and there happens to be 50 copies that the VMRD people bought. See them afterwards if you're interested in purchasing a copy of the book. But for 3 lucky people, this is the thing to keep you awake. I've got 3 copies I'm going to give away. So be alert. It'll be the first hand up, the first person to name 5 things, the first person to see something will get a free copy, okay? So we're going to keep you on your toes. I love the idea of giving away money. There's not money in there, but you could probably make 10 million rupees off of the information in the book. How about that? That's sort of a good giveaway. All right, let's start the first section. Okay, let's talk about customer experience. You know, the thing that we all have been, I think it's like, this is my section I call preaching to the converted. It's telling people what I think they already know, but it sets a context for why we want to talk about some of the other things later. And the first thing is relationships. It really is about relationships. You know, like we said in earlier sessions, you go to the shop, not just because of the things you need to buy, but the people who you met, the connections to the ideas, the fact that they did know your birthday and your son's name and things like that. And relationships are key drivers to experience, and that is ultimately what I believe people are interested in branded experiences. Beyond the stuff should do what it's supposed to do. It should make your clothes cleaner, it should get you faster there, it should make you, less gray or whatever the product is, or smile brighter, but it should deliver on those things always. But it's about the relationships that are ultimately the most important. For me, there's a key difference between the idea of places and spaces. A space for me, which is what many people in the retail world do, is create spaces as a repository or a depository for stuff, things to hold lots of SKUs, and to help people try to get the things they need and then frustrate them most of the time to find the things that they think they need to get by trying to walk through masses of merchandise with way too much selection, difficult paths of circulation, etc. Places, on the other hand, are very different than spaces. A place is like my kitchen table at my house or my mother's house, where a Canadian Thanksgiving, you'd sit down and you'd hear stories about everything that you did during the day. There were the places that my brothers told me how to deal with my girlfriends, or that I had to explain to my father why I didn't do well on the test that day. A place and a space is different. A space holds stuff, and a place holds memories and emotion. Rituals are really important, not just because you do rituals over and over and over again. Habit and rituals are two different things. Repetitively doing something is part of a ritual, but what rituals are really about is not just going to Starbucks in the morning because you like to get your coffee and you go there at the same time, but everything that you do from the moment you close your door to get into the store, to stand in line, to pick up your order at the end of the counter, sets that experience of the brand in a context of the day and of the week, and gives you a sense of meaning about what it means to be a Starbucks customer. So rituals are about building context and meaning, where I stand in my culture, where I stand in my nation, where I stand in some cosmological sense within humankind, and what it means to be me within the context of the family of brands that I adopt to bring into my experience set. So rituals are really key. The next thing for experiences is play. Now, I love play. I've always loved play. I was always the guy who was a camp counselor when I was young. I loved children. I sometimes, most of the time, take a playful attitude to my work. Some people call that sort of just silly and irresponsible, but when I'm serious, I need to be serious. But when I like to play, boy, do I ever have fun. Now, the thing about play that's really, really important to understand is that play is just not about, playing a game that has no meaning. Play is one of the fundamental ways that we begin to understand empathy. Because when I play, I can be both the villain, and I can take the other role, and I can be the hero. And I can exchange those roles as quickly as I'm doing this. I can move back and forth between the villain and the hero. I can play multiple personalities if I want to within the context of a game, and I know play has rules. What's interesting about that is that it's one of those first opportunities that we ever have to stick ourselves in the shoes of someone else and to learn what it means to look at the other from another side's point of view. To develop empathy is part of what play is about. Number 5. We all talk about story, and I can't really underline how important story is in the context of building brand experiences, because it is, for me, one of the fundamental drivers to how we understand the brand. What's really crazy about the idea of story, and I know you've all had this experience, is that you've all read a book, and somehow while you're reading the story of that book, you're able to read the words and at the same time put yourself metaphysically in the narrative of the story. Have you had that experience? You're reading about something and all of a sudden you can see in your mind's eye that story unfolding. I know we all have that ability. And what's amazing about stories in your brain is that as you read or see or hear stories, areas of your brain are lighting up as if you are in the story. So if you read a story or hear a story about a cricket player coming up and launching the ball, in your brain, the premotor areas of your brain are lighting up as if you're in the game doing that very thing. So stories have this amazing ability to put you in as-if scenarios inside your brain. That is critical, because in doing that, it has the ability to make you feel certain things simply by seeing, reading, or hearing a story unfold. All right. I like to talk about brain science. Now, here are 5 things to know about brain science and why brain science really matters. A number of years ago, I started talking, I was telling someone earlier, I started studying psychology before I was doing architecture, and a number of years ago, I started studying neuroscience, which is the sort of neurobiological underpinnings to psychology, the things that are going on at a molecular level and in the, the neural network of your brain and the other functional areas of your brain, and something became really curious to me, and that was that, here's number one. The first person to name 5 things in the engine of your car that makes it work. Name five engine parts. Anyone? This is an easy one, come on. There's got to be some guy who knows 5 things. 5 things. I see someone's writing. Quick. Okay, 4 things. Oh, ding! Wait, name them. Name them, go ahead. Quick.
I don't remember.
Go ahead.
One is this one is
Battery, carburetor, oil filter. That's 3. Name me 2 more, quick. Quick. He's wiring. I'm going to give him the book anyway. I only have 40 minutes. All right. Here's the strange thing. I have this carburetor, battery, pistons, air filter, transmission. If I gave you more than 2 seconds to answer the question, I bet most of you would be able to name 5 things that are parts of your engine. So here's the next question. Listen, we're going to get ready. Here we go. 5 areas of your brain. Just keep going. Cortex. Hippocampus. Holy mackerel. There's always one neuroscientist in the group. All right, here's the idea. How is it possible that if I can tell you or ask you the question, where does experience take place? And I don't, where does experience take place? We all think as architects, designers, and retailers that experience is out there. It's in the stores that we build. It's in the merchandise that we sell. It's on the online interactions that we have with our guests, but it's not actually there. It's in our head and it's in our hearts. And so it came to my sort of attention a couple years ago, how is it possible that we could probably name 5 things under the hood of our car more easily than we can name that you're in 2 hours a day, maybe here it's longer depending on traffic, but you can hardly name 2 or 3 things inside your head, which you're 24 hours a day inside, that make you go. We're more likely to name 5 things of our car than we can about our brain, but yet we know that if experience takes place in our head and our heart, we don't really understand what makes our brain work or the functional areas of our brain that drive experience. So here's the idea. The brain is all about neural firing patterns. You've got a whole bunch of neurons in there. They fire in certain patterns, but it's not just one neuron firing in one sequence that makes you lift your leg or see red or lift your arm. It's those neurons firing in patterns with 10,000 other neurons all at the same time that create a specific pattern. Now, here's the thing about that. The more those patterns fire over and over and over and over again, the more it's easier for you to do that thing. So we all collectively share 500 million years of human evolution, which means that if something over here is loud, or like that bell that goes off, the first time it went off, I did this. We all have those instinctual reactions that are built on neural patterns that we all share, that have nothing to do with culture, have nothing to do with race, have nothing to do with ethnicity, have nothing to do with whether you're a female or not, but have everything to do with being human, that are about firing patterns. Here's the flip side to that coin. If you don't use those patterns, you lose them. Your brain says, hey, I'm 3% of your body weight, but I use 20% of your energy of your body. I'm not going to continue to do things or hold on to neurons and those sort of pathways of firing unless they're being used over and over and over again. So if you don't use them, you lose them. So if you stop practicing a certain thing, you will lose the ability to do that thing. We've all had that experience, I'm sure. The guy who won the archery event in the Winter Olympics in London, I think he was Korean, won and he was legally blind. He hit a target more often in the bullseye than anybody else. How? Because he did this 1,000+ times a day. And every time he did that, his body was registering the angle of his arm, the pressure in his fingers, the stress in his shoulder, the level of his arm in relation. And his body had to simply reproduce those patterns of activity, and he would begin to hit or be more likely to hit the target. The upside to that is that what it means is we are pattern predictors. We have learned over millions of years of evolution that what's important to us is patterns in the environment. So I had to see a pattern when I was walking through the savannah, and I looked at patterns of grass and how the grass would blow. And what I had to be able to understand was that pattern of grass blowing or moving wind, or was it something in the grass that was stalking me? And was I going to have lunch, or was I going to be lunch? We had to learn to be able to see those patterns and changes, and what we're able to do is pick up interruptions in those patterns much more quickly than we are able to pick up the pattern. Here's an example. What's the pattern? First person to raise their hand on the next question. Can anyone describe the pattern? This is not a book-winning question. This is just a lead-in, all right? Sir. Just pattern is, what's the pattern? It's squares and circles, colors, yeah, but there's no particular pattern, right? I mean, I think it's hard to look at it and say, yeah, I can see a pattern. The first person to put up their hand on the next question gets the book. Ready? Watch the screen. What changes? Boom. Right there. What changed? What square?
It was I think it was a yellow square.
And it changed to?
White.
Right. So here's the thing. We're able to pick up the interruptions in visual patterns before we're able to decode patterns. Why is that important? Because it means that visual merchandising and signage and everything else, I can get you to look at a postage stamp from 50 meters away in a store that looks like this. Why? Because when I was working for Dick's Sporting Goods, a large sporting goods retailer in the States, I said, hey, go out in my store, look at the space, and tell me what you think. And I went up the escalator, and I'm traveling up, and I turn around, and I look back at the store, and I see hundreds of thousands of SKUs in this store, 80,000 square foot, 2 levels, and I'm thinking to myself, what do they want me to look at? But I think if they just did that, wouldn't it be easier? I'd know exactly what they wanted me to see. And then all of a sudden they have my attention, and then they can sell me that thing if they want to sell me that thing, or they can help me navigate an assortment that's way too hard for me to understand and actually get around. So what it means is that our brain loves novelty. So don't be led into this idea that there are people who say, oh, I like things just the way they are every day. I have to do things. You know, that's called obsessive compulsive disorder, where people don't like to change things. But we actually love novelty. Why? Because when we get the selection of the pattern wrong, our brain releases dopamine, because that's an opportunity for learning. In that moment where your brain actually predicts something incorrectly and sees something that's novel, dopamine is released, that's the happy chemical, and we have an opportunity there where the brain learns something new, and we all at a brain level love to learn. That's why novelty is important. That's why floor set changes are important. That's why visual merchandising and display are critically important, because it's novel change that drives the memory of experience. The fifth thing, mirror neurons. I know that we all share something that is the same with each other, and that is this. We have these things in our brain called mirror neurons, and those mirror neurons allow me to look at you and your body and your facial expressions and begin to feel what you feel. We all have had that idea that when you walk into a place and we see this, or we walk into a meeting, someone yawns, you yawn. See someone laughing, likely it is that you're going to smile or you're going to laugh. We know that that happens. And we're not only really good at seeing it, but we're good at anticipating what's likely to next happen. So in the animal world, we say monkey see, monkey do. In the human world, we see and we feel. I'm able to feel in my body the anxiety that you carry if you walk into a room and you're nervous. I can feel the joy you have that is able to be shared between us. And so when I see this face, he's not saying, I love you, man. He's not. And this person at Walmart's saying, happy day. And yes, it is. And you shop more happily, and you likely buy more because she's preconditioning you to feel that way. Or these kids who are half naked but smiling about it make people who shop at A&F really likely to be putting more in their basket. And so what I know then is that, like, I can't tell and I can't see the emails that are floating around here in the air. My emails are here, and they're in the air, the ether between us, and so are all of yours. I can't see them, but I know they're there. And I can't see the energy that flows between me and someone else in an engagement, but I know it's there because their affect affects my affect. And there's something that happens between us that we share together in the in-between. So, last section, emerging guest. Every 2 days, I can't go back. Every 2 days, this was 2003, Eric Schmidt of Google, who said every 2 days we create as much information that has ever been created from the beginning of time up to 2003. That was in 2003. That's essentially equivalent to 12 million times the number of books ever written. That was 2003. We're obviously a long way away from there, so this number has not gone down. It's only become exponentially more. But what does that mean? It means that as we see people using their digital devices in these images, something's missing. What is it? What's missing in those pictures? The phone, the tablet. What else is missing? Social interaction is missing. They're together but apart. And the digital world has this amazing ability to be driving a paradigm into our shopping world that says statistics like these should be startling. 40 students graduating college in North America now are 40% less empathic than their predecessors, means that they are 40% less able to engage in relationships where they share that sense of feeling. When did this begin to be precipitously declining? Around 2006, 2007. What happened in 2006, 2007? Anything? Facebook happened and Apple iPhone happened. Now, is there a causal relationship? No. Correlational relationship absolutely does. We all know this. We all know the image of the kids or anyone on the sidewalk all looking at their phone. So in 1926, Nikola Tesla wrote an article for Harper's Magazine, and he said this: when wireless is perfectly applied, the whole Earth will be converted to a huge brain, which in fact it is, all things being particles of a real and rhythmic whole. And he went on in this article to say, and the devices, the instruments rather, with which you should be able to do this will be able to fit in our breast pocket, and we'll be able to communicate with each other independent of geography. In 1926, almost 100 years ago, Nikola Tesla is talking about digital wireless technology like we have today. This is not new, but the impact that it's having on our shopping culture is huge. But what does it mean? It means that if I can get you on the side of understanding that story activates parts of our body and makes us feel certain things, and that we share between us this ability to feel by looking at facial expressions and the way a body is standing or reacting, if I can do that one-to-one, I also know that I can do it over the internet, because all I have to do is see or hear a story and I have the same reactions. But what does that mean? It means that what I can do is I can share my feelings across the internet, and I become digitally extended. My brain and the feelings are shared. And as we go out and we interact on our social media networks, we're taking a trip like Hansel and Gretel did, leaving little dots of ones and zeros along our path. Okay? And that little trail of ones and zeros connects us to people, places, and things, and other cultures. And we're knitted into this digital tapestry that we have, that hovers, I think. I hate that sound. That's the sound. And I'm going to go over 2 minutes, I think, but I'll try to get there. Hovers above. So this idea hovers above our embodied world, and we all share in it. And here's the thing. You know, you become extended, and I call it, you extend yourself to the denizens of the digisphere, the people who live in that digital world above us. And once you're there, you fully take yourself out. You can get rid of your SNS sites, you can get rid of Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and all that, but that's too late, because whatever you shared is out there and has been distributed. So you can never fully erase yourself once you're connected to it, which is an intriguing idea. But what it means is that the retail landscape is no longer a 2D kind of thing. It's a 3-dimensional relationship between multi-layers that are all independent. And then Joe was talking about omni-channel, but it's really omni-experience and omni-brains. And it means that all the people who we share this content with are digitally connected into a cognitive coalition of like-minded brand loyalists who all share the same feelings about a brand and what it means to be connected to that brand. I want you to listen to this.
And I have like
Jane looks at her phone. There's a message.
like someone just texted in a giant group chat, go like my photo on Instagram. It just shows that it happens every single
Happens
second.
every second.
Happens all the
Yep.
time.
I got it too.
Yeah.
I have to say, like, oh my God, this is such a job.
Yeah.
It's like I'm a brand, and I am like
You're trying to
the
promote
brand.
yourself.
I'm the director, the person.
Yeah.
And you're the product.
I'm
You're definitely trying to promote yourself.
To
Yeah.
stay relevant, you have to
You have to work hard.
Relevance is a big term right now.
Yeah.
Are you guys relevant?
I'm
In
so
middle
relevant.
school, we were definitely really relevant
We
because
were
everyone
so relevant.
because everything was established. But now in the beginning
Yeah.
of high school, you can't really tell who's relevant.
Yeah.
Yeah, and what does relevant mean?
Relevant means that people care about what you're posting on Instagram. People want
about
to
you.
know what you're doing. People will open your Snapchat stories.
They're only 3 months into high school, so there is a lot at stake right now.
I always get choked up when I hear that. No. That's a group of 13-year-old girls who were on this show called This American Life talking about what it means to be relevant in their world. And he says there's a lot at stake. What they totally missed when he said is, and you're the product. When these kids are producing digital content and pushing it out into the digital sphere, they effectively become like retailers who create product and ship it to stores. If the cash register's ringing, the retailer stays alive. If these kids are getting likes and thumbs up and all kinds of love over the internet, they stay alive. And they remain relevant as a purveyor of stories about themselves. And their very sense of well-being is tied into whether or not they get likes or don't. And that's a dangerous slope to go down. And what it means is that these kids are really good at understanding the brand of me. It's about them. They understand that it's about them, and it makes them very savvy customers because what they are good at is marketing and understanding marketing because they need to be able to sell themselves and stay relevant within the context of their social network. We got to understand that that's a change. So it's not just about a kid using digital technology to make shoes change different colors, which is cool, but it's about my 15-year-old, who's now 16, Ben. And Ben and I will go for a walk in the forest. And Ben was an early adopter at the age of 12 to Instagram, and we'd go for a walk in the forest, and we'd come back and we'd share pictures over Instagram or social networks, and Ben would post these images. And I would look at him and go, dude, like what forest were you in? Because that wasn't the place I experienced. And what I know he did is he took experience and he modified it. And for him, the modification was more important than the experience he had in the first place, because in modifying, he made the experience truly and uniquely his own. He owned that experience, and the republishing of that story was what he wanted to be able to sell into his social network. And he got tons of likes for being a great graphic artist, but he is a maker at heart, and making is key to who we all are. Now, what does that mean? It means that for this emerging generation, what will be relevant will not be the things that you all think you're going to create for next season and put in your stores. They aren't so interested in whether it's blue this season, and if you don't like it, come back next season and it'll be yellow. They want to write themselves into the narrative of making. Their connection to their digital media making is changing their expectation set about what it means to connect to a brand and be relevant, because they are not a one-size-fits-all generation. There's a generation that immediately puts themselves into story making and brand creation because they do it with their devices. And their expectations are going to be that whoever they connect with, they will become more relevant to them because they aren't simply an observer, they're a participant in the making of a brand. So if you talk about technology at all, you have got to get out of the headspace of technology as simply the things, the trends that I was going to talk about, but talk about it in terms of technempathy. Technempathy is using technology in the service of empathic extension. The device is a vehicle to connect, to storytell, to engage, to share yourself and be relevant in that context, and it's going to drive all of experience. Last slide. So, what does it mean? Well, we know we have customer-created content. People were talking about that this morning. The flow is no longer retailer to customer, but much of the experience and the necessity to create products is from the customer to the brand. And that flow has completely changed in the past few years. But what it also means is that we'll eventually get to customer-created places. You don't need all the stuff in the store, but what will the store become when all that product goes away? Your digital device will manipulate architecture. I can tell you what's going to happen. We're going to be able to change rooms and places with our digital devices and the content that we'll be able to use between the room, the architecture, and the phone. The next thing is that it means that you've got to move to a position of creative, collaborative consumerism. Engage your guests in the making of brands. Engage them in the creation of stories and narratives, because they'll be more relevant and they'll be able to put themselves into the place of the brand in a more profound way. And what that means is that you will move from the potential of having it all about me to having it all about we. And on that note, I say thank you.
Well, thank you so much, David. We've got lots of questions that have come
Uh-oh.
in. And we are going to welcome somebody on the stage right now who's going to make sure that we've got the questions happening. So can we please have
Uh-oh. Oh. There are no questions. Thank you very much. Oh, no.
So please, center stage right there. And can we please have Sudhir join us on stage? Mr. Sudhir from Raymond's, he's joining us right now. Sir, please join us.
Welcome. Be easy on me. Okay, good.
Thank you so much, sir. I know you're going to sum up very, very quickly and also let us know what are the 3 questions.
Hello. Well, that's most enlightening session was here after lunch. I'm sure I think everybody has got too much of new things to think upon. David, thanks a lot for this, actually.
I love confusing you. It's really my job, is to
Yeah.
come up and
So the
confuse
confusion
you.
makes, the confusion makes the creativity as well, isn't it?
Okay, thank you.
So it's give you a chance. Okay, we have almost 26 questions. We got it over here. Out of that, 3 best questions are selected, which I'm going to tell to David. Out of those three questions, 1 question, David, you have to select who is going to win the prize. Okay? I'll read out the questions. The first best question is from Aishwarya Dhingra. It says, touch experience is one of the best way to connect your products with customers. How this experience can be given to 4-dimensional in shopping digital environment?
Next question. No. Say it one more time.
Okay. Touch experience is one of the best way to connect your products with customers. How this experience can be given 4-dimensional in shopping digitally environment?
You know, one of the things that we did at Marriott, we created a thing called the teleporter. Who asked the question? Just raise your hand. Who was the person? So we did a thing at Marriott called the teleporter. And it was really a 4D visual experience. And we're really big into virtual reality, augmented reality, creating those experiences for people to show both our guests and our owners how to do that. The missing component there is if you only attack the visual component to it and you leave out many of the other senses, right? That's what drives this sort of larger sort of embodied experience. You gotta remember, at a brain level, we didn't emerge with a brain, you know, into the world as humans, right? We grew from our body to our head, not the other way around. So our body is the largest brain sort of sensory device that we have. So I believe that to get there, the visual reality, the digitization, the sort of things that you can do digitally enabled are often missing that component that taps into your embodied experience rather than simply a digital visual one or auditory one. So the more you layer in those component pieces, I think you drive deeper that experiential set that is not just born out of seeing or simply hearing. There's a great quote by Confucius that says, I hear, I forget, I see, I remember, and I do, and I understand. So if you've ever been an artist, and I like painting, my art teacher told me to stand when I paint, because when I paint, I do this, and I move my body, and when I do that, I interact with the work in a different way, rather than sitting at a desk or a computer that's only doing this, which is very different. Yeah, so I think it's about engaging multiple senses, and the teleporter that we created had sound, it had heat lamps, it had air, it had little atomizers that blew water, it had all kinds of things. So I think it's about engaging more physical senses. Next.
Okay. Hope that satisfies you, right, Aishwarya? Okay. The next question from Mansa Jain. With the shopping environment becoming more digitally enabled, how do we educate the customer base who is still not technologically evolved?
How do you educate the customer
customers,
base who is not technologically enabled? You know, I think there's a thing about this idea of intuitiveness. Who was the person who asked the question?
Mansa Jain?
Way in the back. Okay. So one of the largest barriers to engagement with digital media is not the media. It's not even our ability to collect data on the media devices that we have. There is a large problem with being able to crunch numbers and be able to come up with actionable results out of those numbers. But the largest barrier is the intuitive interaction that you can have with digital devices. So I'm not sure exactly. I think you have to look specifically at the engagement opportunities, but one thing or two things I think is true. One, digital doesn't always work across all platforms at all points along the customer journey. You know, it's not always the best solution. We all think that, wow, we got to get things in there as quickly as we can, and it's got to be a kiosk and a screen, but often that simply adds to the visual confusion of environments, which actually pisses people off more than it actually enhances the experience. So number two is then, so one is, where does digital most resonate with the guest, and is it a tool for engagement that makes sense? The second thing is how that digital is tied into the choice of an object or the selection of something or how you feel about it, and whether or not you can intuitively interact with that. So if you talk about AI, which we did this morning, one of the biggest trends in digital media or digital integration now is AI, and one of the major trends in AI, it is conversational interaction. Can I talk to Siri without her getting it wrong or delivering the wrong thing to my door? So that's important. Can you engage in a fluid, conversational, intuitive manner with the thing that you're using, whether it's an app on your phone or Siri in your living room, and it has to be really, really simple. Okay?
Okay. And the last question has come from Alistair McCarran. How can we restrict digitalization, not tamper with the empathy of humans?
How can we
restrict digitalization, not tamper with the empathy of humans?
Yeah. Who asked the question?
Alistair.
How can we restrict digital infusion without affecting the empathy of people? Was that your question?
Yeah.
Um,
David, sure.
Whoever, I don't see who asked the question, but note to self, you can't interfere with digital development, all right? It's a train that's running. And you know, the challenge with the train is that what we know about technology is that the changes, the deltas between significant development of technology are becoming shorter and shorter and shorter. So Ray Kurzweil, The Singularity is Near, read the book. It'll bring you some enlightenment about what we're up against in the digital world, because those deltas are becoming smaller. There will become a point where our ability as biological beings will not be able to keep in sync with what is happening technologically, unless we become modified or augmented ourselves. All right? There's a lot in there as an idea. Sounds like science fiction, but the number that everyone is giving in the futurist world is 2040. By 2040, we will be augmented in a biologically engineered nanotechnology kind of way so that we're able to compete with machines. So I don't think you can change it. The second thing is that you have to begin to understand, like I was thinking about my son, texting, for example. Everyone saw texting as a decimation of language. The reality is that if you reframe texting to the development of a second language, and you understand that people who are multilingual have a lesser propensity to have things like dementia later on in life because they're exercising their brain in a different way, you begin to see texting in a different light. You begin to see it as a tool rather than something to be, you know, a terror. And I think if you understand the nature of digital media and how it's transforming communication, yes, and the brain really is a bigger thing. Because guests will walk into our stores in a few short years, and it won't be that they simply won't like your stuff or be interested in talking to you. You literally won't be able to talk to them because it's not about a generation gap anymore. So when we all talk about demographics and psychographics, those are part of the story, but the larger story really is that it's a brain gap. If you believe the fire together, wire together, and synaptic pruning paradigm, use it or lose it, then you'll discover that they simply won't have it to begin with. And then your whole system of customer interaction protocols is going to be completely flipped on its head, and you'll have to find a new way to communicate. And part of it is not to be worried about texting, but learn that texting is an opportunity for development of a second language, and you're not going to catch up with the train, but you have to learn what the train means, not the thing itself, but how it's changing the larger structure of cultural, our cultural awareness and connection to each other. That's a long-winded answer, I know. It's not exactly true, but the train is gone. We're trying to catch up.
Okay, that's great, David. In fact, I'm feeling like, Buddha, right? Everybody knows Gautam Buddha, who had some transformation in his life. So after listening to you, I'm feeling like a modern Buddha. Okay, so
I will now do my only tree pose.
oh, okay. Woo!
Oh, wait.
Fantastic. Snap.
Ah! Thank you.
And please go
Oh,
ahead.
the question.
Yes.
The jury has selected question number 2 is the best question for $10,000. I love that. I've wanted to say that all day.
10,000 rupees, but
Oh,
fantastic.
rupees.
Please join us, center stage gentlemen.
Question number 2. Oh, yeah, it was the art with the okay.
Mansa Jain. Congratulations, sir. Please join us center stage as well. Thank you so much, Mr. Sudhir Saundalgekar from Raymond, joining Mr. David Kapron on stage.
Do you want to? Oh. Yay! We'll stand here.
Congratulations,
I don't think I
Mansa.
answered
That
the
is
question.
fantastic. Thank you very much, gentlemen. And I'm sure there's been a transformation for all of us right there. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you, Mr. Kapron. Thank you, Mr. Samdalgekar.